Well, here we go again. If you've seen my Earthbound 64 Iceberg Part 1 and 2 videos, you'd know that there's a ton to cover when it comes to the unreleased N64 version of Mother 3. However, the Game Boy Advance version has essentially as much stuff to cover as the N64 version did. In fact, I did cover some GBA material on those icebergs, such as the unused Throne Lucas animation and the original love theme, so if you haven't seen those two videos already, I do recommend checking them out. This video was suggested to me by my editor, the one who did my SpongeBob merch video and is working with me on a different unrelated video at the moment. Anyways, this video will be covering an iceberg for cut content and other tidbits about GBA Mother 3. You can basically consider this a part 3 to the previous two icebergs. There's a lot to cover, so I won't waste any more time. This is the GBA Mother 3 iceberg. Contained within the files of the game are many back sprites to boss enemies, which aren't used as bosses and mini-bosses can't be approached from behind. There are also unused battle sprites for enemies that don't show up at all, those being the Alkaline Man, which is a palette swap of the Battery Man, and a cut mini-boss called the Tiny Forest. It was supposed to be fought in the Mole Cricket Hole, likely in this spot just before the exit. It even has battle memory text. One of the few unused cutscenes in the files to the game. Making use of a walk through walls cheat to get past the pig mask guarding the entrance to the Chimera Lab in Chapter 4, you can talk to the receptionist and view a cutscene that involves the mini-theater. There's no way to trigger this cutscene to play during the final game. Similar to Earthbound, waiting on the title screen to the game would have made the game play these little cutscenes of fun little snippets of the events of many different characters from the game. These were most likely cut due to the developers not wanting to temper expectations for the game, making the player think this game was going to be some wholesome fun family adventure, or something like that. Before Mother 3 was officially unveiled for the GBA after mostly silence to the public following the N64 version's cancellation, a flash game emerged on Brownie Brown's website that seemed to be in a similar style to the Mother series. This tease ended up being one of the first big giveaways that Brownie Brown were the ones developing Mother 3 on GBA. In 2020, Nobuhiro Imagawa posted pieces of unseen concept art for Mother 3 from the game's development. Sadly, they didn't show much, but we did get to see a pig mask design and pig machine designs, art of Wes, Ionia, an unused Chimera, and even New Pork City. My friend Snowwood made an entire video delving into this, but to summarize, the train that appears in Chapter 4 has some interesting properties. Hacking the game to have different characters dodge it makes for some interesting results. The most interesting point about this, however, is that Boney, despite dodging the train in the final game, doesn't seem to have a sprite made for him that looks like he's jumping out of the way. That's his laying down sprite. However, Flint, who doesn't dodge the train in the final game, does have a sprite for that, which goes completely unused. Using a walk through walls code and removing graphical layers, you can find one or more hidden Flints just chilling out of bounds. Basically, the reason these Flints are here is whenever there's a mirror present in a map in the game needs another character sprite for the mirror effect to work. Whenever the mirroring character is invisible, the character is stored away until needed, and the reason it's Flint is because the default character sprite bank in the game is 00, which is what Flint's sprite bank is assigned to. Long story short, Flint is actually magic, I guess. All the unused music in the files actually don't have official names assigned to them. The names are all given to them by Tomato when the fan translation was made. Why did he name them stuff like Geiger's theme when that's extremely misleading as to what the beta elements of this game entail? Who knows, who knows. This refers to this specific unused text in the game. Not much to say besides that, so on to the next entry. This refers to the debug room in the files to the game. There's a lot of cool stuff that can be done in here. I'm not sure what to say about it other than it's the main hub for picking apart the contents of this game. Before the game had received the fan translation, many people were very desperate to play Mother 3 in English. Basically, someone made a program that took the text from the game and auto-translated it into English. However, since this was machine translation in the year 2006, the translation quality sucked pretty bad, so this program really wasn't of much use to anyone. In the original game, there's a glitch that prevents all 6 of the different attack sounds that Duster has to be used. Only one of them is used instead. This was fixed in the fan translation. Way to go, the fans can fix something Nintendo wasn't able to do themselves. This refers to this hidden image found in the files to Mother 3. It's a photo of the Ostrich Burgers Historic Summit Inn Cafe on Route 66. Sadly, this place doesn't exist anymore, but at least we can say it's immortalized within Mother 3's files. The localization rumors bit is kinda self-explanatory. There's been numerous rumors throughout the years that Mother 3 was going to receive a localization, none of which have ever been proven true, yada yada. However, the Earthbound 3 bit is something I thought would be interesting to touch upon. Most people usually give Mother 3 a hypothetical Western title of Earthbound 2, to which I say, it'd make more sense if it was just called Earthbound 3 instead. I mean, this is the 3rd Earthbound game. I'm just saying, if by whatever fate caused Mother 3 to actually see a worldwide release, I'd honestly prefer for it to be called Earthbound 3 rather than Earthbound 2, just saying. There's unused sprites of Duster in the files to the game where he's using the wall staples, just with no wall staples. My only theory on these is that originally the wall staples were separate sprites, but that was changed at some point obviously, and these sprites of Duster here are remnants of that. There's unused sprites of Mike in the Clayman factory worker uniform in the game's files, which is odd since Mike is never seen working there. Post time skip, he's only found at the old man's paradise and never at the factory. Apparently the dialogue on Tane Tane Island, which as most players of Mother 3 would know, is pretty unpleasant among other things, was apparently even worse originally. About that, Itoi has said, even the temporary dialogue I had used there at first was so unpleasant I couldn't stand to look at it, so I tried to tone down just enough by rewriting it, but that island definitely isn't pleasant at all. There's unused sprites of Salsa that match the ones of the other characters used in Chapter 7 in the one part where they climb up the snowy mountain. This suggests that Salsa originally had a larger playable role in Chapter 7 at some point in development. Unused sprites of Bronson walking, running, and blinking as an idle animation suggest that at some point in development, Bronson was either a guest party member or even a flat-out playable party member. These sprites can be seen in action by hacking the game to add him to your party. Bronson's role in Chapter 1 seems to have changed quite a bit during development. I do wonder what exactly he was meant to do as a playable character. As confirmed by unused dialogue and unused sprites, Flint was originally going to be around for more of the story than what's in the final game, similar to what his role was in Earthbound 64. This unused data points towards Flint having been playable in Chapters 4, 5, and even Chapter 8. I made a whole video talking about Flint's cut role if you want to know more, so I'll move on to the next point now. The kindness stat is related to an unused mechanic called kindness in the game. I won't go on about this forever either because, again, I made a video covering the kindness stat and my theory on how it functioned in greater detail, so check out that video if you're curious. Early, unused designs for 2 of the Magypsies in the game, Aeolia and Phrygia, exist in the game's files. These seem to be from a fairly early point of development. Some of their sprites are either missing or overridden. There's unused text found in the location of some of the other Thunder Tower text that's about touching a machine and seeing what happens. Coupling this with these unused sprites of Lucas being zapped and falling to his knees, it seems that originally, PK Flash may have been an optional ability to obtain rather than something that happens out of the player's control, like in the final game. There's an unused animation of the Masked Man after his battle in Chapter 7 where he explodes and is then picked up. Combining this with the also unused animation of either the Pigmask Colonel or Pigmask Captain picking up something, it shows that instead of just flying away like he does after he's beaten the final game, the Masked Man was going to suffer major damage during the battle against Lucas and Co. in Chapter 7, explode, and as a result, be picked up and be carried away by a Pigmask. It's unknown as to why this story element was changed. Although the Mother 3 fan translation is essentially as close to the quality you could expect from an official localization, it isn't without its flaws. One of the most notable flaws that was detailed on Mado's Legends of Localization page for Mother 3 is that they originally mistranslated this line for Abby, and due to this, people misinterpreted the original meaning of the line. It just goes to show you that the slightest flub in a translation can change the context of something greatly. On the topic of the fan translation, one important thing it did in terms of localization is change the names of several characters and locations. The most well-known example of a character name change is Yokuba becoming Facade. A less known example, however, is with Scamp. In the Japanese version, he's just referred to as Elder, but the fan translation team gave him the name Scamp, which is a little odd considering he did actually have a confirmed name in the N64 version, that being Grandpa Sid. As for renamed locations, the most notable example in my opinion is the Cerulean Beach, which was renamed from the Greatscale Beach in the Japanese version. Greatscale was actually the name of a separate village to Tazmily in the N64 version, but was heavily downgraded to just a beach in the GBA version. Now I'm just rambling though, so I'll move on. Discovered in the files to the game last year, Jonelle was planned to tell Flint the news about Hinawa in Chapter 1, rather than Bronson, like in the final game. When looking at Jonelle's sprite sheet, you can see that he has sprites that are basically the same as Bronson has when he's struggling with Flint. This point goes back to the bit earlier on the iceberg where I mentioned Bronson's role actually changed a decent amount. Also related is that in the campfire scene, Jackie was supposed to be present rather than Fuel, and despite not being present there in the final game, this interestingly can be seen in the credits still. Also discovered last year was that Hinawa's grave was going to be placed in the upper left corner of the graveyard rather than have a section to itself. Unused sprites of Porky in the files to the game show an early design for him and his pod, showing him to be shirtless for whatever reason. Maybe this was closer to what his design was going to be in Earthbound 64? In the cutscene that plays just before the final battle with the Masked Man, only Lucas and Duster are necessary in the party to make the cutscene play. Replacing Kumatora with other party members soft locks the game, except if you replace her with Salsa, which instead plays the cutscene out as if nothing's wrong. Some of what I consider to be the best dialogue in the game is the unused text that was meant to be a conversation between Lucas, Flint, Kumatora, and Duster on the way down to the location of the Last Needle. The text reads as follows: "I'm certain that Hinawa is watching over us. There's nothing to be afraid of. Klaus. I wonder where he is now and what he's doing. He's alive. I know it. I've always had complete faith in that. Until I find any clues leading to him, I'll keep on searching, even if it takes 50 or 100 years. Lucas. Once you've made up your mind, there's no need to hesitate. I'm always behind you all the way. Good luck."
If that old fogey's right and our memories were all made up, then who exactly am I? Was I really Princess of Osohe Castle? No, never mind. Right now we gotta focus on the needle. What was your mom like, Lucas? Was she nice? Huh? No, it's just that I have no memory of my mom. I only asked because I wondered what it's like to have one. Family, huh? I wonder what old Ione is up to. Even if our memories are just fabrications, the fact we're here now is real. Let's go, Lucas. Let's go and pull that final needle.
Come to think of it, all three of us are motherless. Talk about a big coincidence. My mom died a long time ago. My dad raised me by himself. He'd make food and teach me how to fish and stuff. He was a strict but nice dad. Even if my memories since childhood are fake, Wes probably really is my real dad. I get the feeling that there's definitely no mistake about that. What do you suppose could be waiting up ahead? Locria, aka Facade, seemed to have a different fate in the early version of the game. There's unused text that hints towards them maybe suffering amnesia. When you think about this in conjunction with the Egg of Light, maybe the original plan was for Porky to erase their memories once they were of no use to him anymore. That's just my theory. I wonder what exactly the developers are intending. Despite losing his shoes, the sprite of Klaus at the end of Chapter 1 is still wearing them. The most strange part about this is that there's an unused sprite of Klaus missing his shoes, which seems like it was originally intended to be used here instead of the one that's used in the final game. As sad as it is to be burdened with this knowledge, Boney's voice samples in Mother 3 for his attack sounds and other parts are just various dog sample sounds from sound resource packs. So no, they did not bring in a dog to a studio just to record him to use their voice for Mother 3, I'm saddened to say. There's an unused sprite in the game that's just the words, happy end. I theorized what this could have meant for in my Mother 3 Kindness Stat video, but we have no concrete evidence of what exactly this happy end sprite was meant for, unfortunately. Well, this is something that's pretty well known by a lot of fans of Mother 3. The unused battle backgrounds meant for the final battle originally, depicting stuff like scary Klaus faces and other strange elements, are still very uncanny, hence why it's pretty low here on the iceberg. There's also some other unused battle backgrounds unrelated to the final battle, which by comparison are a lot more tame. There's this unused design for Kumatora in the files to the game. The best theory for what this design is that it's a scrapped post-time skip design for her. The logic behind this is that in Earthbound 64, the pre and post-time skip designs for Kumatora both have different outfits, and this was something that was seemingly going to carry over to GBA Mother 3 too. Obviously that didn't happen in the final game, and Kumatora's final post-time skip design is extremely similar to her pre-time skip design. This prototype design in the files to the final game has a few animations of her doing stuff like throwing some PSI attacks, shouting in the distance, and teleporting, which leads me to my next entry on the iceberg. PK Teleport seems to have originally been planned to have made a return from Mother 1 and 2, but was ultimately cut from the final version of Mother 3. In the files, there's an animation for the unused Kumatora design and for Duster 2 of them teleporting. What interests me most is that they're the only two to have this animation in the files. I do wonder if Lucas or anyone else was also meant to have this animation too. There's data in the files that suggests that at some point Hinawa may have been a party member. It seems that almost all of this data was erased from the code to the final game though, so it seems like this was something cut pretty early on. There's an unused cutscene of Hinawa and the twins attempting to escape the forest fire from the beginning of Chapter 1, with some unused sprites of them trying to push something and falling over. It's unfortunate that this cutscene wasn't included in the final game. I guess it was a bit of a remnant to how Chapter 1 was in Earthbound 64. There's an interesting variant on the love theme that's in the files to the game. It's playing as background music to the video right now. Since we know that the Mother 3 love theme was something that was made late in development, that suggests that this love theme variant was cut at a late point too. Who knows what it could have been used for. No one can stop Lucas from pulling the needle. No one. This quote refers to this unused text meant for when Lucas pulls the last dragon needle. Originally, if you were to select no when given the option to pull it, this text would show up, but it seems that this text was either dummied out or deliberately removed from the final game. Mother 3 most of the time uses two different sprite banks for each character. Usually this is for post-time skip or alternate designs, such as the regular Tazmily villagers and Lucas and Kumatora. Flint also has one of these, but his design is completely the same. It's possible that Flint might have had a post-time skip design planned for the GBA version, seeing how he was originally playable in chapters 4, 5, and 8. Sadly, since this duplicate sprite bank is completely the same as his regular one, we don't get a glimpse as to what this potential unused design was, like we did with Kumatora. But going off his Earthbound 64 post-time skip design, maybe it featured his clothing being tattered and his hair having turned grey? Who knows? I theorize these unused sprites of Flint were possibly meant for the sunflower fields in Chapter 6. The fact that he's looking upwards and walking, talking, and then jumping, I can't think of anywhere else that these would be used for. It would thematically have made sense back when Flint was actually playable in Chapters 4 and 5, and so on. Unfortunately, no leftover text in the game's files lends any credence to this theory, but a lot of the text data related to playable post-time skip Flint seems to have been scrubbed from the files, so I wouldn't say exactly that this disproves it or anything. In the files to the game exist these strange unused sprites of Bud, Lou, Jackie, Lyda, Abbott, and Isaac. These most likely were for a cutscene of some sort. When pairing these unused sprites with these unused animations of an early Porkybot design shining its eyes, the theory emerges that originally the Porkybots could brainwash people by flashing these lights at them. But that's only a theory. When Mother 3 was just beginning development again on GBA, they didn't plan initially on having this game have a similar art style to Mother 2. We unfortunately have little knowledge on what exactly they were planning originally though. Maybe the use of dialogue portraits? Within the files to the game are these unused sprites of Duster and Flint looking really angry. They both seem to correspond with each other. I suspect that they were meant somehow for Tane Tane Island. However, there's another character that I think had some sprites that may have been meant for Tane Tane, that being this angry looking ghost of Hinawa. When you consider that Hinawa is absolutely nowhere to be seen during the mushroom trip part, and that, as I mentioned earlier, Itoi thought the early dialogue for the area was too unpleasant, it paints a picture as to where this mad Hinawa ghost could have been used for. The Bird of Light is an unused story element for Mother 3 that only has a few references to it left in unused text of the game. We really don't know much about it. It's just very odd how apparently it was supposed to be the antithesis to the Dark Dragon, and yet it was completely cut from the final game. Oh, what could have been. This refers to this singular unused sprite of the Masked Man. This likely would have been a follow-up to what I previously mentioned on the iceberg about the Masked Man exploding after the fight in Chapter 7, and this sprite would show the aftermath of his repairs. When you sit for a minute and analyze just what this sprite is, it becomes pretty messed up. Like, I know it's only a tiny pixel image, but this sprite is depicting the reanimated corpse of a child being mutilated by having his organic parts be replaced with mechanical parts. And they said Earthbound was dark. Okay, this sounds completely ridiculous, but hear me out. Negative Man in Mother 3 is such a strange, nothing character that his inclusion in the game just really baffles me and so many other fans of the game. What was the point of him being here? Then one day it hit me. Negative Man may be some sort of gag Itoi made to poke fun at SpongeBob. Think about SpongeBob. He's this yellow, square guy who's such a happy and positive character, always bringing joy to others even if they're miserable. My theory is that Itoi saw SpongeBob and thought, what if I made him depressed and put him in my game as a joke, and then he went ahead and did it. He made the antithesis to SpongeBob. Anyways. In short, Bronson, in both his GBA and N64 designs, was modeled after the actor Charles Bronson. It's not something that we've ever gotten definitive confirmation on, but like, I don't know, that looks like Charles Bronson to me. Speaking of Bronson, this entry I want to quickly talk about the cutscene in Chapter 8 when a bunch of the Tazmily villagers and the DCMC all show up to encounter Porky. All of them have thematic or story-related reasons to show up, but then, why does Bronson? What's he gonna do, tell Flint he has good news and bad news again? Anyway, the reason why Bronson does show up here is, like I mentioned previously in this iceberg, Bronson was once playable, so he did have a bit of a larger role in the story originally, methinks. Speaking of that one part where some of the Tazmily villagers in the DCMC go with Lucas and Co to encounter Porky, the ones who were going to join in the battle to fight against the Porkybots just before that weren't going to be the DCMC originally. It was initially going to be Dr. Andernuts, Wes, and Flint. I don't really mind that they changed this, since changing it to the DCMC joining to destroy the Porkybots is a good callback to the Runaway 5 helping Ness and Jeff in Earthbound in that one part. Very recently discovered, and by very recently I mean after the rest of the script of this video was already written, it was discovered that the unused cutscene data for the unused conversation between Locria and Kumatora is still intact in game. Here's what it looks like. Now, you may think that the bit where Duster freaks out and gets mad is out of character for him, to which I will say I don't disagree. However, I'll say that I guess at some point in development, he and some of the other party members were going to have more complex character traits than what they show in the final game. Also, if you may be thinking that it might have been Flint who was supposed to say those lines instead of Duster, well, we went and compared the first-person pronoun usage in the original Japanese text to other instances of both Flint and Duster's dialogue in the game, and the pronoun used in this bit of text, ore, is the same one Duster uses in other dialogue, rather than the one Flint uses, which is different. So that basically narrows it down to having been Duster. You get all that? Well, I've finished this iceberg. But before I end the video, I want to quickly make a couple of corrections to two previous points I made in the EB64 Iceberg Part 2 that I was wrong about. Those 2 points being that, 1, Mr. Kemley wasn't the only cut NPC from the N64 version that we knew the name of. We also knew about Bar, which was Butcher's 70-year-old grandma who was known for knitting sweaters for the villagers. And 2, Rock'n'Roll Spicy wasn't actually carried over from the N64 version to GBA. That was a mistranslation of the information. Instead, that track was made specifically for the GBA version. Also, fun fact, the theme White Owner's Recommendation was the original theme for Snowcat Mountain, but during development, Shogo Sakai remembered from Mother and Mother 2 that Snowman existed, and decided to put it in Mother 3 as well. Anyways, I'm rambling now, so I'll end it here. Thanks to everyone who helped make this video possible, and I'll see you all another time.